As they say, you have a better chance of getting drafted by the NBA, NHL, or NFL than you do of being signed by WWE. How true that is, a discussion for another day. But what is unquestionable is the grit and perseverance it takes to make it to the industry's biggest company and call yourself a WWE superstar. And as cliche as it sounds, with great power comes great responsibility. The constant need to stay relevant, adapt to the ever-changing standards of the business, and reinvent yourself. While the likelihood of success largely depends on the talent themselves, given the scripted nature of sports entertainment, the blame occasionally falls on creative, and often for good reason. Despite the talent and enormous fan support some superstars possess, their characters somehow end up in a wasteland. Today, we're looking back at the wrestlers who had everything it takes: the talent, the look, the crowd behind them, and still got buried by the one thing they couldn't control: the booking. This one is a classic, and for all the right reasons. A well-rounded in-ring performer with the looks of a Hollywood actor and massive fan support. There is, however, no need to ignore the elephant in the room and acknowledge his lack of mic skills. What is ironic is that this issue was, at one point, completely resolved when Cesaro aligned himself with one of the best promo guys in Paul Heyman. It was one of those rare moments when the prayers of the WWE Universe were answered, and Cesaro's character suddenly felt complete. After winning the inaugural Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal at WrestleMania 30 and becoming a Paul Heyman guy, it seemed like creative had finally connected the dots, giving us a strong mid-card or even upper-card competitor for years to come. But just 3 months later, the Swiss Superman and Heyman parted ways. And what fans of conspiracy theories might find interesting is that around the same time, audiences began seeing less and less of his signature move, the swing. It hardly feels like a coincidence that his return to a solo run and the near disappearance of his fan-favorite move happened simultaneously. As reported in the summer of 2014, the swing was getting too much fan support, which creative didn't like given that Cesaro was a heel at the time. Instead of capitalizing on it and allowing that organic connection with the audience to grow, potentially leading to a natural face turn down the line, Cesaro went from being a complete package to just another great bell-to-bell performer in a matter of months. Later in 2014, on Steve Austin's podcast, Vince McMahon stated that Cesaro's downfall stemmed from his lack of charisma and verbal skills. But with Paul Heyman in his corner, there was little need for elite mic work, and with the audience firmly behind him, the question of charisma almost answered itself. Maybe he was never destined to be the next John Cena, but Cesaro had all the tools to become one of the most reliable mid-card stars, and that potential was effectively dissolved in 2014. For years to come, ironically, he would primarily be used as a tag team performer. While that gave us a brilliant pairing between the Swiss Superman and the Celtic Warrior, the Cesaro section ultimately remained a dream that never came to fruition. This guy didn't need Paul Heyman. From his iconic, glorious entrance to strong in-ring work and a natural ability to thrive as a top heel, it seemed like nothing could diminish his NXT momentum. In reality, he became another talent with an incredible background in the black and gold brand, whose best days were now behind him. That being said, he was by no means wasted during his SmackDown and Raw run. He was, however, underutilized. Despite receiving a fair share of the spotlight, his natural trajectory as a successful solo performer was cut short just 1 year after his SmackDown debut. All that came from it was a 54-day reign as United States champion. What was supposed to be a promising beginning was quietly abandoned before it ever truly started. From being famously proclaimed as the next Triple H, it is fair to say that his tag team run from 2018 all the way until his retirement in 2022 was not the best use of his abilities as a major solo star. WWE's decision not to position Roode as a main event player is, in fact, understandable. At the end of the day, he debuted on the main roster at the age of 41. You don't need to be a professional writer to understand that building a long-term main event star at that age is not the most logical business decision. However, placing him in the tag team division was a controversial move that was met with strong dissatisfaction from his fan base. In a way, it is comparable to making LA Knight a tag team competitor. Even within the tag division, flashes of his charisma and presence would occasionally remind fans of what he was capable of as a singles competitor, but those moments were never truly expanded upon. Instead of using those sparks as a reason to revisit a solo push, they were treated as isolated highlights rather than signs of something bigger. With his incredible glorious theme song and strong presentation, both in-ring and character-wise, it always felt like his NXT success was never even attempted to be replicated on the main roster. It was a gimmick built to succeed on the biggest stage, yet it ultimately became another example of untapped potential. As briefly touched on before, the main roster call-up was a notable curse for top NXT black and gold names: Andrade, Aleister Black, Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa, Bobby Roode. These are all wrestlers who won NXT's top prize, yet ended up as mid-carders on the main roster for short periods of time at best. Keith Lee, on the other hand, earned the nickname Limitless for a reason, and did something none of the previously mentioned names managed to do. He held both the NXT and North American championships at the same time. Adam Cole's reign was one for the books. It lasted a staggering 400 days, and Keith Lee was the one to finally take the torch. Just as it seemed like his stock couldn't go any higher, it all ended up feeling like a waste of both Cole's and Lee's title reigns. Adam Cole's historic run, like any long title reign, was meant to elevate the next major star. Unfortunately, NXT and main roster creative seemingly couldn't get on the same page, and almost immediately after, Lee was called up to Raw, forcing him to relinquish the North American title and lose the NXT championship just 44 days after winning it. The double championship match between Cole and Lee was a major moment meant to define the brand's next top figure for the foreseeable future. Instead, less than 2 months later, the winner was already moved to Raw. Credit is due where credit is due, because the beginning of his main roster run was very promising, similar to Cesaro's big 2014 push. In his first PPV match shortly after his call-up, he picked up a huge win over Randy Orton. A few months later, he even received a WWE Championship match. It felt like, given his Survivor Series 2019 performance, dominant NXT run, win over Orton, and world title opportunity, the Limitless character was destined for the upper card. However, due to the pandemic situation, he, just like Roman Reigns, had to step away because of underlying health concerns. With both men returning in the summer after months away, the similarities ended there. Reigns returned and went on a historic championship run, while Keith Lee infamously reappeared as Bearcat, a rebranded version of his character that never truly fit, only to be released shortly after. As they say, don't fix what isn't broken, and the character that gave him so much success was swapped for something that never really belonged to him in the first place. While Cesaro's inability to cut a generational promo was holding him back in 2014, during that same year, Rusev, whose mic skills weren't much better, was ruling it all. However, he brought something different to the table, due to his ethnic background and genuinely intimidating aura. He captured his first singles gold the same year he debuted on the main roster, and for more than a year, he wasn't pinned or submitted. It literally took WrestleMania and the best version of John Cena to hand him his first defeat. One way or another, he was already a made star. Unlike many others on this list, Rusev's main roster success was undeniable, and it seemed like his dominant persona would carry on for years, solidifying him in the upper card. So many opponents were fed to him during his epic 2014 run, only for it all to lose meaning the following year due to a series of questionable creative decisions. I mean, what do you do with someone as dominant as Rusev? An epic singles feud with another powerhouse? Another mid-card title run? Another undefeated streak? How about a romantic feud? Because of all things imaginable, that's exactly what WWE went with. There is not much to say here, except that the storyline felt completely disconnected from what made 2014 Rusev special, and ultimately did more harm than good. Next came the controversial idea of uniting 4 guys under the sole premise that they all happen to share a passport from somewhere outside North America. There are factions remembered for greatness, entertainment, and their uniqueness, and then there is the League of Nations. One of the most forgettable stables in modern history, consisting of 4 perfectly capable singles stars grouped together without any real long-term direction. For Rusev, it marked a continued decline in his character's credibility, as everything built during his dominant 2014 run felt like a distant memory. But then came the light at the end of the tunnel. Reinvention is the name of the game, and in 2017, the Rusev Day movement began. What initially looked like a throwaway comedic gimmick quickly evolved into one of the most over acts on the roster. Unsurprisingly, WWE's response was hesitation. In a similar fashion to how Cesaro's swing momentum was once downplayed, Rusev Day chants were reportedly muted or minimized in certain instances to reduce crowd focus on him. Regardless, it didn't matter. The chants became a viral phenomenon and a full-blown audience movement that turned him into a legitimate fan favorite. Instead of capitalizing on it with a simple babyface turn, WWE delayed it for far too long. In the end, his organic connection with the audience never truly paid off. Outside of occasional highlights like his match against The Undertaker and a WWE Championship opportunity against AJ Styles, the Rusev Day phenomenon somehow became one of the biggest missed opportunities in recent memory, with no meaningful long-term payoff despite overwhelming crowd support. The pattern carries on, with Karrion Kross being the next name on this list whose NXT main event dominance never fully translated to the main roster. His infamous Raw debut has its negative reputation for a reason. As cool as it was seeing Jeff Hardy pick up a meaningful singles win, the fact that it came at the expense of the NXT champion Kross was a shockingly poor decision. Karrion Kross suffered his first pinfall loss in just 90 seconds. As Kross later stated himself, the match was originally planned to go around 10 minutes and was cut down to under 2 right after he made his entrance. That moment set the tone for what would become a turbulent 2021 run. A month later, he was officially moved to Monday nights, but without Scarlett and with a new, questionable look. WWE's tendency to repackage characters that already work into diluted versions of themselves is an unexplainable yet consistent issue that has impacted many careers, including Kross's. Within just 10 weeks of becoming a full-time Raw superstar, both Kross and Scarlett were released from the company. The story doesn't end there. With the new era beginning under Triple H's creative leadership, several names found their way back in the second half of 2022, including Kross. What initially looked like a fresh start for Karrion Kross, particularly in his rivalry with Drew McIntyre, ultimately ended up being the only significant singles program he had for a long stretch. Throughout 2023, Kross had no meaningful premium live event feuds of his own. His only appearances on major shows were his Royal Rumble participation and being part of a multi-man SummerSlam Battle Royal. From sending a message to Roman Reigns in 2022, which ultimately went nowhere, Kross closed out 2023 without a single memorable rivalry to his name. Entering 2024, his presentation shifted again, this time with the addition of Authors of Pain. Not much can be said here, as the Final Testament lost both of their totally forgettable feuds against the Pride and the New Day. By 2025, things went even further downhill for AOP with their release from the company. Kross and Scarlett, however, saw an opportunity to reinvent themselves once again. In the world of professional wrestling, the ability to stand out is everything, and the right gimmick can completely change a performer's trajectory. This time, Kross leaned into a more psychological devil's advocate persona. His attempts to push fan favorites like Sami Zayn and AJ Styles toward embracing darker sides of themselves added a new layer of intrigue to weekly programming and naturally drew curiosity from the audience. The reactions were there, the character work was there, but what was missing was consistent, meaningful booking. When Kross's momentum finally began to build, there was little real effort made to capitalize on it, and instead, he was losing to Sami Zayn. Whether it was the audience reacting positively to him against babyface opponents, his strong promo work, or the potential of the character itself, it never transitioned into a sustained push. Majority of the WWE universe were practically begging to put Kross over Zayn, only for him to lose the feud, and instead being faced with a new contract that didn't include Scarlett as a part of the company, which made him leave WWE. The work that was put into Bray Wyatt's Fiend character was undoubtedly time-consuming and likely took many months to develop. What also took a significant amount of time was the gap between his return and his first match as The Fiend. Bray debuted the new persona in April 2019. The highly innovative cinematic-style Firefly Funhouse segments were extremely well received and brought something completely new to weekly programming. As fresh and curiosity-driven as they were in the beginning, it's hard to ignore the first major misstep, stretching the build for months before The Fiend ever stepped into the ring. Even fans who were heavily invested in the story from the start gradually found their interest fading as the character remained absent from live action. It took roughly 4 months after the first Firefly Funhouse episode for Bray to finally wrestle his first match as The Fiend. While the debut was strong, with him making quick work of Finn Balor, the first real crack in the presentation came shortly after with the infamous Hell in a Cell match against Seth Rollins. Creative essentially booked themselves into a corner by placing a character like The Fiend in a world title picture far too early. Rollins, as champion, couldn't afford to lose the title in that spot, while The Fiend, presented as an unstoppable force, couldn't realistically take a loss either. The match outcome and execution resulted in one of the most negatively received finishes in modern WWE history, significantly shaking The Fiend's momentum after only his second match. To their credit, WWE did course correct shortly after, and in his third match, The Fiend captured the Universal Championship. The debate about whether the character needed a title run is one for another day. What matters is that the Hell in a Cell backlash was temporarily addressed. With a long build leading to that moment, it felt like nothing could derail Fiend's momentum. Then, Bill Goldberg of all people entered the picture. If destroying Kevin Owens' momentum in 2017 wasn't enough, 2020 saw another controversial decision, with Goldberg capturing the Universal Championship once again. While this on its own is a big enough of a travesty, he jobbed the living hell of the monster that was on the run of his life. A lot can be said here, but to put it short and sweet, Fiend's aura was gone. After that, nothing was quite the same for Bray Wyatt. Aside from a somewhat big win over John Cena at WrestleMania and a short second Universal Championship reign that lasted only 7 days, the mystique surrounding the character just wasn't there anymore. What once felt like something truly special had slowly turned into just another character trying to find its footing. And that's what makes this story so frustrating. The Fiend didn't fail due to a lack of creativity, effort, or audience investment. It failed because its most critical moments weren't protected. In a character built entirely on aura and unpredictability, it only took a few questionable decisions to break the illusion. Once that illusion was gone, there was no real way to restore it. What could have been remembered as one of the most defining characters of modern wrestling instead became another example of how even brilliant ideas can fall apart when execution doesn't match the vision. And when you look back at all of these names, it becomes clear that this isn't just a story about individual wrestlers falling short. It's a pattern of momentum being cut off too early, of characters being changed when they didn't need fixing, and of organic fan support being ignored when it mattered the most. Because in every single one of these cases, the talent was there, the reactions were there, and the opportunity was right in front of them. But for one reason or another, that final step was never taken. And in a business built on moments, sometimes all it takes is one decision, one wrong turn, for something special to slip away and become just another what if.